All right, hello. Welcome back, welcome back. Hi. We start? Okay, very good. A brief announcement. Arlene, want to come up? So Arlene will be your Langdell this semester. She will have your first meeting on Saturday?
Yes.
What time?
Saturday at 12:30, and room 518. Don't confuse it with that informational.
That's actually my proper Langdell.
Oh, okay.
So what room is it?
518.
What time?
On 12 o'clock, sorry.
Okay, very
12
good.
to 1:30.
Okay. So Arlene was in my class last year. She got an A. She did very well. And she's also experienced as a teacher. She worked this summer at the Department of Education in both Texas and the federal capital in Washington. So she has a lot of experience with teaching. Go to this. The purpose of the Langdell. No, Siri can't help you with this, but Arlene can. The purpose of these meetings is not to teach you ConLaw new. That's not her job. That's not fair to ask of her. I can barely do it, right? The purpose of these is to help you learn from her experience being in my class last semester. She can help you improve your outlines, your notes. She can help you go over old exams, which I think she will. You have a midterm coming up in about a month, and she'll help you for that as well. So get to know her very well. She's extremely intelligent, very smart, and will help you do better in this class. If you don't, it's only your fault. Is that a hand? Okay. Is there anything you want to add?
No, yeah, just excited to go see you guys. If you can, so I can expect who's going to be there. Lexis, you can add yourself to the class. It just makes emailing a lot easier. And if not, when you come, I can show you how to add yourself on Lexis. And
just one caveat. These aren't recorded. My classes are, but hers aren't, and there's no handouts or any given out. So if you don't go, you don't get the materials. Whatever PowerPoint you shows, you can take whatever notes, but there's no handouts. So that's your incentive to actually show them. Okay? Thank you, Arlene. And you can say or go. Nah, she already heard this class. But I'm grateful she came here at 7:30 at night to talk to you briefly. So this is gonna be a busy weekend for you, unfortunately. I didn't plan it this way. I scheduled this makeup like 2 months ago. But on Sunday, you're having a makeup class at 2 o'clock. The way it works is I'm going to live stream it. So if you can't be in the building, you can watch it at home. If you can't watch it live, they'll be recording. You need to email me within a week to certify that you've watched it, and I will mark you present. There's not any catch. I don't want any, you only tell me your notes if you want to. Yes, you're welcome to, but I will take your word. You're all lawyers soon. You have to record your own attendance for various things. I'll be in the honor system. I'll be covering the 11th Amendment and federalism. I apologize this year. I don't apologize, but the Jewish holidays hit all of class days, and I need to cancel a lot. So that's why I need this makeup and one other. The upside is you have no class on Monday. I'll see you again on Wednesday. Yes?
I guess on the date, should that be 9/9 instead of 9/12?
Yeah, it should.
12th is a Wednesday.
It should. Yeah. I'm sorry. That should be on Sunday. I don't know why I wrote 9/12. I'm sorry. 9/12. Thank you. Sunday. This room right here. Yep. Yes.
If it's going to be a live class and you have questions and you watch it live, is there a way to ask questions? Or
Yeah, I've had this in the past. If you want to maybe text your friend a question, that works. I once tried it, and this was a disaster, to do a Google Hangout, which allows people to join. But the problem is it creates feedback with the audio, and it sounds like garbage. Actually, this is a funny story. So once my first year, I was doing a Google Hangout. I was somewhere remote, and the students were here. And somehow the classroom computer got muted, and no one would unmute it. So the entire class I was speaking, and I could hear them, but there was no feedback. So I was just like lecturing into darkness. It was really weird. So if you have a question, you can ask a friend. I'm not going to be checking my phone. I won't do that. But if you want to text a friend, they can probably answer a question for you. I've had that before. It doesn't really bother me. That's the best we can do. Yeah, so. So there's a link on the syllabus to my YouTube channel.
Okay.
And if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, a notification will pop up when I'm live streaming.
Okay.
Josh is live, right? Pretty much. And you can check the YouTube channel, say, live streaming. So that's how you do it. Anything else? Again, I apologize. I hate doing weekend classes, especially for students, but there are just too many holidays this semester, and I have to finish stuff. Yes, Markia?
For the class, but on the blog, when you pull up the class notes, when I click on that link, it doesn't pull up any class notes. I don't know.
It doesn't pull up that page?
Yeah, it pulls up a page, but then the notes that are on there are not.
I'm seeing it. So if you click this link right here, where it says,
It's the one that's right above where it says schedule.
On your tabs. You actually have it, you have it reversed. Your property class, you have your notes on that tab link.
Yeah.
You have notes for your property class. When it goes back to Google, it has all your pages.
oh, property.
It's actually for property, but if you click on property, there's our notes.
I inverted it.
Yeah,
But if you click from the home page, it works.
it's for the home.
Can someone email me that? I'll fix that later. Thank you for telling me that. None of my property students noticed. I guess they're really on it. I must have inverted them. I'm sorry. But as long as you can get it here, I'm okay. Okay, but just email me at that and I'll fix it after class. Okay, anything else? All right, let's do a poll question. I think we'll bridge our last class to this class. Let's see. Start poll. Okay. Start polling session. Okay. Polling. Where is it? There. Okay. So here's your question. And I apologize, it's not framed perfectly, but it's the best I can think of. What or who can the federal government require to take actions? What or who can the federal government require to take actions? A state official, an individual, all the above, none of the above. I'm sorry?
Thus far, we're just going off of our readings thus far?
Everything you've read to this day. All right. Give another 10 seconds. People are still struggling a bit. Okay, another 5 seconds. People are still shuffling. All right. Who was you were last? Does that mean Brooke, you next? I like that reaction. I like that reaction. Thank you, Brooke. All right, Brooke. What's your
I'm gonna go with E.
None of the above. Okay, tell me why. What's your thinking here? Article 6, okay. Good.
Start with Article 6, Clause
Good.
2.
Okay.
The laws of the U.S. shall be common law of the land.
Okay.
And the jurisdiction of the state shall be found thereby. And they're not listed.
So what does it mean for the Constitution and the laws of the United States to be the supreme law of the land? What does that mean?
That if any laws are made conflicting,
Like any state laws, right?
any state laws,
Okay.
that the Constitution supersedes the
Thank you, Adrian.
council.
You were thinking out loud. It's okay. But the question there isn't about which law is supreme. I'm not going to argue with it. The question there is, can the federal government require them to take certain actions?
No. Also because, federal government.
Does the supremacy clause say anything about forcing people or states to do stuff?
No.
What do you think the answer is? Okay, tell me why you put E.
But I wasn't thinking really about the supremacy clause, but I agree with what you said. But I know that you can, the federal government can provide incentives to make people do things.
Incentives. What case is that with incentives? You guys know your cases.
Give me a moment.
Take your time.
What was that?
She said, oh, you're making fun of her.
No.
Oh.
I was asking her, what was the policy, you said what?
She said the federal government can give the states incentives. I said, what case discusses?
Is it in it? One second, once it's back, just, I'm gonna get it right up.
I'm waiting. I'm not going anywhere. I'm standing right here. Can I have your hint?
What's the first letter?
S.
I didn't know.
I'll give you a better hint. Involved alcohol.
Oh, like you can't make the minimum age, what was it, 19, 21, something like that, in that case.
What's the name of that case? So, I don't mean to be camp woman equal. She happened to be next in line, but the final and the midterm, which is coming up, fairly soon, you'll need to know cases, and it's not, multiple choice A, B, C, or D. You have to know the name of the case that fits the facts. All right. So, Dan, you want to introduce? Yeah, that was it. South Dakota. That was, I'm sorry. Okay, you got it. So, Danny, so how does it work with incentives, right? If Congress wants the state to do something, what can they do?
Here's some extra money, but when you get it, you have to apply
You put some strings, you put conditions on the funding, right? Danny, is there any problem with putting conditions on funding? Is there a limit on how many conditions they can put on funding? Oh, there is. Carrie?
I would think it no, but, I mean, I would think it can't be too extreme that you are, I think they use coercing.
Ah, coercion, right? What case? Yeah, I'm doing it, right? Yeah, get your notes out. You're next. Marcus, you're next. Just get ready. What case, right? What case, Carrie, discusses the limits of Congress's spending power with the conditions? We did a case very recently, in fact. Oh, she's helping you out.
Yeah, that one.
That one. No, that doesn't work. If you're going to cheat, you have to say the answer. You can't just say what she said. No. I'm not going to let that fly. What's in the case? That one. What she said.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Sorry. NFIB. Okay. Well, let me take a step back, right? The question I asked is, can the federal government require states and state officials and individuals to take action? And I think between the four of them, we got the one basic question. If Congress wants, they can basically bribe states, right? They can dangle money in front of the states and say, hey, if you want these highway funds, lower your drinking age. That's South Dakota versus Dole. But there's a limit on the spending power, which was the Sebelius decision, NFIB versus Sebelius, right? Obamacare. That they can't threaten to take away all the states' Medicare funding, or Medicaid funding, if they don't expand the program. Okay? But that much is easy. My question wasn't about asking them nicely and dangling some money. My question was, can they require or can they command action to be taken? So Marcus, what's your thought here? Well, but that's spending, right? But I'm asking, can they straight up say, South Carolina, you got to do this. North Dakota, you have to do this. Okay, why not? Okay, what case tells us that? When I'm gonna ask you a question, your answer has to either give me a clause of the Constitution or a case, right? That's just for your own knowledge. If I ask you a question, I'm not asking your opinion. Your opinion's lovely. That doesn't get you very far in court, right? I'm asking, is this fair or not? I don't really care. I mean, if you think it's fair, whatever. But if I ask you a question, it's give me a clause of the Constitution or a case. It could be a majority opinion, it could be dissent. I don't care. But you gotta give me some authority to back up your assertion. So, Marcus, you said states are sovereign. What case have you read recently which discusses this issue? Really recent, Marcus. Dude, we're reading today.
Oh, yeah, of course, New York.
Of course, New York. What was New York about, Marcus? Let's take it over. Cut to the chase. What did Congress try to do to New York in that case?
Congress tried to,
Okay, very good, right? Can they do that, Marcus? Was that constitutional?
no, it's not.
Okay, very good. So, we know for sure, and we'll go through these cases in depth, but I want to just at the outset. New York versus United States. Congress cannot require states to take some action. They can't force a state to raise the drinking age. They can't require a case to take ownership of radioactive waste. Okay, so let's go down the line, right? Can Congress require a state official to take certain action? No. Tell me why. Give me a case.
Based on
Just take your notes. You're really close. You'll remember if I
Prince.
Prince, yes ma'am. Exactly. Okay. So, can the government compel a state official, a sheriff, for example, to implement the federal program?
To implement a federal
Yeah.
program? No.
No,
And
they-
because of the, the Prince case based on the very.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so very good. So they can't commandeer state officials. So Joe, what about individuals? Can Congress require individuals to take action? What case am I asking you about here? No, it's not helping. What is this? I turn it back for 1 second to cheating. Look at this. You have so nice and stuff. I love it.
No, my first question is different.
Richard. Okay, why are you thinking Richard?
Because that, the farmer was growing wheat for himself.
Was Congress forcing him to grow wheat? The Congress saying you have to grow wheat? What did they tell him?
So he couldn't do it.
Or, I don't know, they didn't say you couldn't grow wheat. What happens if he grew too much wheat?
There's a penalty.
Penalty. So they weren't telling him what he could or couldn't do. They were just penalizing if he grew too much crops, right? So what case then, Sergio, is that whether the government can require you to take an action?
So NFIB.
Yeah. What was that case about? What was Sibelius about?
That was the.
Very good. To buy insurance. Does Congress make you buy insurance?
Under the tax thing.
Yes. You're exactly correct. You even got my follow-up question, right? NFIB says that Congress can't make you buy insurance, but they can tax you on that insurance. What's the difference? I know. But the court held they can't do this. So I want to put these on the board, one right next to the other, right? Congress can't commandeer states. New York versus United States. Congress can't commandeer state officials. Prince. Congress can't commandeer individuals. NFIB. All three of these cases are connected in a way that is not obvious. Right? Now, Brooke actually stole my question 5 minutes ago. He did. So let's go back to the supremacy clause, right? Article 6. Is there anything in the supremacy clause, Brooke, that says stuff about commandeering? You already answered it. Is there anything that says commandeering that Congress can force people to adopt? Judges are not on that list. See, you're like 5 minutes out of schedule. The supremacy clause does not provide the basis for these cases. What about the 10th Amendment? All right, we'll go to the 10th Amendment, Anna. The 10th Amendment says, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or limited to by the states are reserved to the states, respectively to the people. Does that say anything about whether Congress can force states to take certain actions?
No, this is whatever's not for Congress, it's meant for the state.
All right, so then here's the million-dollar question, right? What is the textual basis for these three doctrines? New York, Prince, and NFIB. That Congress can't force states to take action, that Congress can't force state officials to take action, and that Congress can't force individuals to take action. What is the textual doctrine at issue here? Yeah, it's gotta be a clause. No? Does Commerce Clause say anything about commandeering states? There's one.
When do you go to the next day and talk about it?
Did you just hear her whisper it? I didn't. I have very good hearing, so I can go crazy. All right, so, yeah, the answer is necessary and proper. But I got to conclude why. Okay? In a very first week of class, we discussed McCulloch. Right, McCulloch v. Merrill. And you recall the question was this: can Congress charter the federal bank? That was the question. Marshall said that a bank is not a regulation of commerce, so that's out. He said a bank is not taxing, so that's out. He said a bank is not coining money, so that's out. But he explained that Congress has an additional source of authority to do that which is both necessary and proper to execute the other authorities. So is it a useful way of regulating commerce to have a bank? Marshall says, sure. Useful is necessary. Then he discusses problems, right? I made a big fuss about this before we go back to later. It's not enough for some federal power to be useful or conducive or maybe inconvenient. It has to be proper. And what does that mean? It has to be consistent with letter and spirit. Not very helpful, right? But there's some federal power that perhaps goes too far. In at least these three cases, the court has found it is not a proper exercise of federal power. What unites New York with the United States, Prince and NFIB, is a necessary and proper clause. And I think New York doesn't explain it very well. I think Justice Scalia does a decent job, and then Chief Justice Roberts does the best job of explaining it in terms of just clarity. But in each of the three cases, they found that Congress lacks the enumerated power to take a certain action. They lack the power to take an action. Okay, and what do we know from the 10th Amendment? When Congress lacks a power to take an action, who has that power? Bingo, state. There you go, that's New York. O'Connor doesn't say this clearly. She kind of hints at it in another way. But if Congress lacks the power to commandeer a state to take ownership of the waste, that's not a power for Congress. It reserves to the states. So it's not a 10th Amendment case. People often say that New York is a 10th Amendment case. Right. The 10th Amendment plays a background principle, but it's actually necessary and proper. In Prince, Lee makes the point much more clearly again. He says the last best hope of those who defend ultra-virus constitutional action is necessary and proper. And he says straight up that this is not a proper exercise of federal power. And then we get to the Obamacare decisions we had last week. For Robert, I think, states as clearly as he can, although sort of fuzzy, that even if it's helpful to mandate people buy insurance to cover everyone with pre-existing conditions, it's not a proper exercise of power because it's an unprecedented act it's too broad in scope, and it drags all these new people into the scope of federal power. So these three cases, Prince, New York, and NFIB, are all center around the best proper clause that is very, very different. The answer to this question is, I think all of these are correct, but we got to the end eventually. It's none of the above. That's pretty good, 60%. Lahavi put C, which was individual. And you probably didn't connect to the Obamacare decision. This is why you have to know the cases very well. And you have to synthesize that what was the issue in Obamacare? Mandate of insurance. Federal government made you buy that. Good. Yes, sir. Prohibiting what, though? Commerce.
Yeah, commerce.
Which was something, a voluntary action. In other words, once you're engaged in commerce, Congress can tell you to stop doing it. But they can't make you do it in the first place to get yourself into the stream of commerce.
Oh.
By the way, remember from CIFRO, stream of commerce, it came from here. We got it first, right? ConLaw had it first. Once you're in the stream of commerce, you're stuck, right? You're in the federal system. Remember that? That's flashbacks, right? CIFRO. That Justice O'Connor, by the way, was Asaki, right? Once you're in that stream of commerce, the feds got you. Once you grow your wheat or sell your lottery tickets or do whatever else, you're in the stream of commerce, and Congress can regulate your actions. But if I'm just sitting at home on the couch doing nothing, NFIB says, I haven't taken any action. Congress can't force me. Because once you buy insurance, they can regulate what kind of insurance you get. But the initial decision to buy it or not is what puts you into that stream of commerce. I love when other classes converge on common law. Don't get me started on the Erie doctrine. Don't get me started. It's wrong. Erie is wrong. Yeah, go back to Swift. It's wrong. It's wrong. You made it. You're going to put it up. It's wrong. You won't settle common law. It's wrong. By the way, Erie was decided the same day as, was it Jones and Laughlin Steele? It was decided the same time as the other New Deal cases. It was a huge centralization of federal power, right? The elimination of federal common law and the New Deal commerce case, they're all decided at the same time. Any questions on this? Okay, let's do New York. The facts in this case are a little bit complex, so I'll take some time to go through it. Who's next? You're next. Okay, who's your next? Sorry. Gerald. Okay, thank you. It's your birthday. Happy birthday. Did you bring cookies for everyone, or was that just what I did?
You're making me feel guilty, and you're sick.
You're sick.
He was in the ER.
Okay, why?
Just give him
You want a birthday pass? Is that a thing?
No.
Okay, then answer the damn question. What are the facts? Here are the facts in New York, please, Gerald. Happy birthday. Answer the question.
And then Congress decided to respond by enacting the declare the federal policy ability of capacity anywhere else I could say. But this act was, sort of resisted, so it was amended in 1985. It decided to take a brief extend 7 years of radioactive waste. In other states, in exchange, the unsighted states agreed to end their reliance on the states cited by 1992.
Okay, very good, very good. Okay, good for now. Okay, so we have a situation. You did very well for being sick on your birthday. Sorry. So let's go on, right? There was a time where I think Justice Ginsburg was getting chemotherapy, and she came back to court the next day. We've had some pretty, you got to get your thing. Anyway, actually, the worst one was her husband passed away, and she came back to court the next day, like nothing. She was really tight with her husband. I'm sorry?
No, sorry.
So you can complain, okay. Anyway, but that was remarkable. She was basically chemo and coming back to court almost on a daily basis. So we'll move on.
So you can't complain, Gerald.
And he wasn't even complaining.
If you're here, you're getting called on. That's the rule. So anyway, we have here what's called a collective action problem. You know what a collective action problem is? You ever hear the phrase in economics? Want to volunteer? Collective action problem. Okay, a collective action problem is like this, right? Imagine you have a situation where you offer free bicycles to rent, right? They're free. Just pick one up and drop them off. Okay. Who thinks those bikes can actually be returned? Of course not. They'll be stolen, right? No deposit. When you have a commons, right, where people can take as much as they want, people take advantage of it. Remember in property, the rule of capture, right? You hunt as much as you can. We had a collective action problem here, where you had something bad, radioactive waste. No one wants this stuff in their backyard, right? Did you study in property the NIMBY phenomenon, not in my backyard? Right? No one wants radioactive waste to be put in their state. So you had, what, 2 or 3 states that had these dumps. And all the states, 47 other states, are flooding these states with radioactive waste. And these states are like, wait a minute, this is not fair. We can't hold all this garbage. So Congress tries to alleviate this problem. And indeed, they put together a bill that was basically drafted by the states. That's one of the ironies of this case. The states actually wanted this. And then when they got it, they complained and sued in court and won. So they actually wanted this. And the regime was this. Congress would have several different incentives to deal with this radioactive waste crisis. Some of the incentives were okay, and the other one wasn't so good. So one of the incentives was monetary. Okay? If a state didn't make their own arrangements to take care of their waste, they would have to pay certain fees, surcharges to the other states, right? And basically the states that had these dumps would be able to get more money. Okay. Dusty, is there any problem with Congress requiring states to pay additional money if they don't have their own arrangement for dumping their waste? Is there any problem with that? Why is there not a problem with that sort of first approach? And the first and the second one are more or less the same, so I'll just lump them together. They're similar enough. But why is that initial approach with the funding not problematic?
The phrase that they use is encourage the steps is an exceptionable exercise of Congress's power to authorize the states to burden interstate commerce.
Exactly. And hear what she said. She said burden interstate commerce, right? This is like the channels, right? If you're literally sending waste across state lines, that is a regulation of interstate commerce. And I think just about everyone would agree that that's something Congress can regulate. And by regulate, they can mean charge a surcharge, a premium, put some fees on it. Okay, so there's no objection to the first one. It's the third one, the take title provision. Adrian, what's the take title provision of the federal law?
What it required was that the states, if they did not choose to legislate that they could handle their own waste, then the consequence to that was once notified by the owner or the person who produced the waste, they had to then take possession of it.
Good.
They had to pay any fines that were associated with them not taking care of it.
Good.
And then that was the third one. And they would be take possession and the second one.
I think you said it, they obligated for damages.
Okay.
Yeah, so the take title provision is the most severe. And if you remember from property, the phrase title means like ownership, right? Effectively, the state had to pass a law that says any waste in the state that's created by private parties. Again, this is not government-created waste. This is waste created by corporations in the state. Any waste that's created by private parties, the state takes ownership of. And this doesn't just happen spontaneously. The state was required to enact legislation for taking ownership of it, handling it, transporting it, and critically, if there was any damage that resulted from this waste, the state's on the hook for damages. By the way, 11th Amendment, we have discussed this, but usually you can't sue a state for damages. So this thing was all sorts of unconstitutional. Just top to bottom. What was that, Adrian?
No.
Very good. So,
That's gonna lead to an answer.
okay, no, you're done. Samantha's up next, but you're done. Just you're good. You're done. So, here's the question, right? Can Congress enact this law? Can Congress require the states to adopt legislation to take ownership of this waste? Samantha, what's the answer?
No.
Okay, tell me why.
It's outside the authority of Congress.
Okay. Why? Why is this outside Congress's authority?
The majority says that the act commandeers the legislative processes of the state.
Commandeers. Samantha, what does this phrase mean, commandeers? What's the word commandeer sound like? What are the first, command, right? Command, yeah? So Samantha, what does it mean to commandeer the legislature? What does that mean?
States are sovereign. They have their own legislatures and they make their own laws.
Uh-huh.
So the federal government can't force states to enact their laws. They can choose on their sovereign powers.
Okay, very good. She's correct. The key point is this. Congress can't force a state to legislate on a certain issue. You don't just take ownership of waste overnight. Laws have to be passed. Congress can't force the states to legislate. The same way that Congress can't force the states to raise your drinking age, for example. And they also can't force the states to engage in this sort of radioactive waste scheme. Okay? But what clause? I already mentioned Elliot. But why is this beyond Congress's power, right? O'Connor doesn't say explicitly, but why is this beyond Congress's power? Yeah, what clause? I mean, look at Justice Stevens, right? Justice Stevens, has, I think, a little bit of a point. He says, where is this in the Constitution, right? Why can't this be done? So what's the response to Justice Stevens?
So what's the, Dr. Justice Stevens?
Well, Justice Stevens, what does Justice Stevens argue in his dissent, Elliot? Flip, right? Do you have any notes? Stevens sent your book, right? I sent this right.
No state shall without the consent of Congress enter any agreement or contract with another state.
What does Justice Stevens argue? What's his position? Tim?
Basically, New York had already taken advantage of the situation, and so he says the state should be stopped from asserting the unconstitutionality.
Yeah, he makes that point, which I think it's actually kind of cute.
Yeah.
But what's his constitutional argument?
He says, any substantive restraint on the exercise of the Commonwealth powers has to get justification from the nature of its limitation.
Does Justice Stevens think that there's any prohibition on commandeering?
No.
Why not?
Basically, he goes into it's being formalistic and rigid, and it's not keeping up with.
But is there anything in the Constitution that prohibits commandeering, Tim?
Not that he cites directly.
So I mean, Justice Stevens, this is one of his big things. Justice John Paul Stevens was a Ford appointee, Republican appointee, though it turned out to be quite liberal over the years. But this is one of his main bugaboos, right? He did not believe that the commandeering doctrine exists. You see this in Prince much more clearly, right? He denies it exists altogether. And I mean, he's not without argument, right? What provision of the Constitution does the majority say renders this federal law unconstitutional? What clause do they cite?
I would say it is the necessary proper clause.
Yeah, but now walk us through, right? Why is this law run afoul of the necessary and proper clause? Why does this law violate that provision?
I believe what Justice O'Connor tried to argue is that even though it is nice, convenient, necessary, it is not a proper exercise of.
Now, why is it not proper? That's the $1 million question. Why is this not a proper exercise? We have this problem, right? Nuclear waste, flooding, toxic waste Avenger, right? All this bad stuff. Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, right? Why? I don't even know. Why is this not proper? Why can't the feds deal with the significant interstate spillover problem of radioactive dumps? Why is it not a proper exercise of federal power? She doesn't say. I'm asking you. She hints at it. She gets it a little bit, O'Connor.
With that, I would say because that is the power reserved for the state.
But that's the question. How do you know it's a power reserved for the state?
Because this is not enumerated for the Congress to decide.
So everyone see the circle, right?
Yes.
I'll get a second, Marcus. Makes a very astute point, right? Look at the 10th Amendment, and this confuses a law student every year, so I'll do it slowly, right? The 10th Amendment says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution are reserved to the states. Okay. How do you know if a power is reserved to the states? Because it's not delegated to Congress. But how do you know if a power is not delegated to Congress? Because it's reserved to the states. Whoa. I just made your head spin, right? The Supreme Court has described this provision as a tautology. Remember from logic high school teachers here? Basically, A equals A, if you put it in Ayn Rand terms, right? It is what it is. One more time, let me try this. If a power is not given to Congress, it's reserved to the states. If a power is reserved to the states, it's not given to Congress. How do you know if a power is not given to Congress? The states have it. And how do you know if a power belongs to the states? Because Congress doesn't have it. The 10th Amendment, she's laughing, I agree. The 10th Amendment by itself doesn't give you the answer. It can't, right? Whenever you see politicians, I like the 10th Amendment. Okay, that's nice. Actually, Brett Kavanaugh this morning actually nailed it. He actually explained the 10th Amendment and Lopez and Morrison perfectly in a colloquy, I think it was Senator, was it Hatch or was it Grass? I can't remember. Anyway, this morning around 10 o'clock, 10 hours ago. But Kavanaugh nailed it this morning. He said that the 10th Amendment reflects the fact that Congress doesn't have certain powers. For example, they can't regulate guns. That's for the states to do in school zones. They can't regulate domestic violence. Morrison, that's for the states to do, right? But that doesn't get you the answer you need, right? Why can't Congress regulate this? The proper inquiry turns on something very different. And Justice O'Connor gives a very, I think, eloquent description of federalism. Right? Michelle, what's federalism?
According to...
Oh, I'm sorry, Marcus. I forgot your question. I'm so sorry, sir.
Go ahead, Mike.
No, please. Give me. I heard him grousing in the back. So, what was your question?
There was an internal conflict.
An internal conflict.
It resolved itself.
I love my favorite kind. All right, Michelle, you want to take a stab? Federalism.
Sure. Isn't it, let's see, it says federalism secures the citizens the liberties that they derive from sovereign power. So federalism would be the state's sovereign power and their right as not to be
You're on the right track.
imposed on by
Right. Vincent, what's federalism? I think you got mostly there. Vincent, what's federalism? You're with this evil federal society, these federalist papers, right? What is card carrying member? What is What is federalism?
Um,
Are you now? Have you ever been a member of the Federal Society? Right? No, McCarthy. What is federalism?
That's,
Sign your reading. What is?
she did mention it at some point.
I mentioned it, right?
Maybe it was the next case that mentioned it. I don't remember now.
Why are they called the Federalist Papers? Maybe I'll try that one. Study those.
So, if you go back to the, prior to the Constitution, you had, what was it, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. I forget which way they, stand.
Let me help you guys out. This is an unfair question, right? Federalism. Anyone? Yeah. Either one. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Federalism, Marcus said correctly. I was going to call on you eventually, right? Federalism refers to the balance of power between the states and the federal government. And that's what the 10th Amendment basically recognizes, that there's some things reserved for the states and something reserved for the feds. Whatever the feds can't do, that's what the states can do, right? So that's what the 10th Amendment actually says. But O'Connor, I think, gives a fairly robust defense of why federalism is important, right? Quinn, why does Justice O'Connor think federalism is so important? In other words, why is it important to protect states? Why is that significant in our constitutional order?
So the federal government doesn't overreach, like, into what states.
Why is that problematic, right? Who cares if the federal government overreaches into states? Most countries in the world, they don't have federalism. They have a central government, and that's it. Why do we need this two-tiered system? Right? Why is federalism important, Quinn? According to O'Connor, at least.
According to O'Connor, we talked about the mirror image thing with the Congress Clause and 10th Amendment.
Why does O'Connor think our Constitution divides authority between the federal government and the state governments? Noel?
Because federalism secures to citizens the liberties that derive from the diffusion of sovereign power.
The diffusion of sovereign power. What the heck does that mean?
So basically the closer that you are to your representative, the more liberties that creates for you.
Why? Why is it that if a government's closer to you, it protects more of your freedoms?
Because you have a bigger voice in removing that person.
Everyone heard what he said. Say it again, Noel. Very good.
You have a bigger say in those persons that are representing you.
And Yaron, your hand was up patiently waiting. Do you have something you want to add? No. Okay, perfect. Well, you're both correct. You're both exactly right.
Yeah.
O'Connor sketches this vision of federalism, right? You don't protect the prerogatives of states, state sovereignty, merely because states are nice. Not all states are good. Some states are good, some states are bad, right? That's how you want, right? You protect states because it secures freedom to the individual. It protects individual liberty. And if you want, Kavanaugh nailed this point this morning. He was basically reading from O'Connor's dissent almost verbatim by memory. This guy is wicked smart. It's scary. His answers are so subtle. He's running rings around these senators. They have no idea what he's doing, right? He's just running absolute circles around them. And I've heard him give the same answer verbatim 3 times because he has it committed to memory, word for word. And he has these little subtle tweaks that people don't pick up on. And he's really, I think he may be better than Roberts. I'm reserving judgment. Roberts had the best hearing. I think Kagan had the second best hearing in recent memory. Yeah. I think he actually may be superseding Roberts. Yeah. No, he's really sharp. Really sharp. I'm impressed. But he made this point eloquently this morning. I think he was reading from O'Connor's dissent. That when government is closer to people, it's more responsive. And what's more responsive is more likely to secure liberties. Now, is this accurate as a matter of history? Probably not. Maybe yes, maybe no. Some states that are pretty small are pretty oppressive, and some states that are pretty big are pretty free. But the bottom line is it's a lot easier to persuade your local representative then has to persuade 100 members of Congress and 530 members of the House from across the country. And that's O'Connor's point, right? That's why state sovereignty is important. It's not because of the 10th Amendment. Once again. So when you think about what makes a law proper, what's going on in O'Connor's backdrop is the federal government interfering with local governance? Because that interference screws up the protection of freedom. Yes, sir, Jim?
Yeah, just, so then is the point that federalism protects the liberty of the individuals because the government is smaller or closer? Or close?
Oh, both. By smaller, I mean instead of having to appeal to representatives from coast to coast, you'll have to appeal to representatives in your state. Right? I mean, you have a state like, Rhode Island, which is like, you can drive across in 20 minutes, and then you have a state like Montana, which is humongous and about the same number of people. Right? So it's not the number of square foot in the state, it's the proximity of people to government. Does that make sense?
So the responsiveness, sorry, I'm just trying to understand, the responsiveness is then from the...
You don't have to persuade representatives nationwide. Okay. You only have to persuade representatives who focus on your local interests.
Whatever local is.
Whatever local is, yeah, your state. Right, although let me just caveat this, right? Excuse me. We have a respect for states' rights, but is there federalism for cities?
No.
You're right, there's not. As a matter of local government law, the city of Houston doesn't have to exist, right? Texas could abolish Austin tomorrow. They might actually want to, right? So this is a huge issue, right? Local control doesn't get the same protection because basically the state of Texas can preempt anything the city of Houston wants to do. Yeah.
We as a state kind of adopt the same system that exists, the system of government between the state and federal government.
I don't know any state in the country that has that. We could, but no state has that. In every state, the cities exist at the pleasure of the government. So, for example, if Austin wants to enact a tax on plastic bags or ban plastic bags, this actually comes up in a lot of cities. Texas can just preempt that and say, nope, you guys need whatever bags you want. If a local city wants to ban Uber, and some Texas cities have tried doing that, I think Austin tried that, Texas say, nope, we'll have one standard nationwide or statewide, Uber's allowed everywhere. So the states and the cities have a different relationship than the states and the federal government. I think the 10th Amendment reflects the relationship between the states and the feds, but not the local ones. Okay? Now, as an empirical matter, is O'Connor correct? Does she provide any evidence that federalism protects liberty? Not really. This always bothered me. I think she probably has a good point, but she makes no argument in favor of it. It kind of irks me. I think she makes a sound point, but doesn't actually back it up, which always frustrates me. And they sort of repeat this sort of thing over and over again of why federalism protects liberty. They don't really say. Even in Obamacare, right? The Roberts opinion on necessary and proper is like 3 paragraphs long, and there just isn't much meat there. There's just not a lot there. I think Kavanaugh gave more this morning than Roberts did in his opinion in the FIB, but I don't know. What do I know? Okay. So where am I? Okay. So the case then turns, right, on necessary and proper, which doesn't even mention, which is the craziest part of the entire opinion. But the case turns on necessary and proper. And she basically says that requiring a state to legislate, requiring a state to adopt this take title provision is itself an improper act because it intrudes onto state sovereignty. She writes that accountability is diminished when state officials can't regulate their own matters. Now imagine this, right? Who am I up to? Yeah, please.
It's so weird that she says that, and then I know later on in the opinion she talks about it doesn't matter that they went, they formed this cooperative, and went to the federal government.
Well, are you next? No, sir. I'll come. Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question about this, right? So she says accountability is diminished, right?
Right.
Is that the thing you're objecting to? You're objecting to someone else?
Well, when she says it's diminished due to the federal coercion.
Yes.
Okay. But it wasn't coercion because
they
went to the federal government.
Yeah.
So who's being coerced? But
yeah.
then she says later that that's not, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
She does say that. I get that, but.
Well, let me ask you this question, right, Janice? if federalism is about protecting individual liberty, right? Let's just assume for a minute, right?
Mhm.
If federalism is designed to protect individual liberty, can the states give up the liberty of their citizens by compact?
No, but
No,
not necessarily.
But
no.
if this case is about individuals, does it matter that New York agreed to it?
But the accountability is not diminished because if my state official decides to enter into this,
Did they have a
this
choice
compact,
though?
my
Right.
state official.
But let me take Janice's point, right?
Well, I
Let-
haven't made it yet.
Go on.
Well, I'm saying, if my state official enters into this compact, accountability on that state official is not diminished because as a citizen, I can still, through the political process, hold him accountable when it's time to vote again. I can still hold him accountable. Now, had the federal government enforced the act on them without them coming first, then her point probably would have been a little stronger. But you can't say on one hand there's no accountability due to federal coercion, and then on the other hand the states went to them, and then say that doesn't matter.
Let me give you a hypothetical, right? Let's just say there's governor number 1 and governor number 2, right? Governor number 1's in office today, and he approves this federal bill, right? He says to Congress, I want your help, okay? And this is very unpopular. You vote out of office. But the bill's already in effect. Governor number 2 says, I don't want this regime anymore, so I'm going to sue to challenge it. Why does governor number 1 bind his state forever?
But he doesn't bind the state forever. I mean, he doesn't, because our political process is
But why
continuous.
can't governor 2 not challenge it? Because he says governor number one screwed up.
I guess he can challenge, but that's not her argument.
I'm making a different argument. Government is not continuous, right? Why can
But the
politician
political
A...
process is continuous.
No, it's not.
But it is, because
Why
at some point that governor can be elected
This is a
out.
fair point. Why can Governor A forever reduce the liberty of its citizens?
Why can't, say that again?
Why can governor number 1 make a decision that forever binds its citizens?
But that not forever binds. I get that.
And then governor 2 says, you know what, we need to sue to get out of this. That's the only way to get out of it. The federal mandate was in place. The law said you have to legislate. And if governor number 1 approved of it and governor 2 didn't, the lawsuit was your only option.
This is your only option. This is your only option.
The law said you have to make this law.
So then tell me, how does that diminish accountability?
I'll tell you how.
The individual accountability.
I'll tell you how, right? I'll explain it. That's actually my next point for Clay, right? So Clay, let me ask this question.
Sorry,
Let me ask this question, right? The law says, let's just say you're a member of the state legislature, right? You're a member of the state legislature. The law says you must pass this law. You have a choice. The federal law says you must pass this law. You have to enact. If you want to vote no.
Then I can vote no.
The law says you have to do it. Federal law. Aren't you bound by it?
No, because it's not proper.
But that's the point, right? Now, what if you say this decision hadn't happened yet, right? And you say, you know what? I'm bringing the supremacy clause. It says I have to vote on it. I have to go tell my constituents, I don't like this law, but the federal government's making me vote on it. Who's accountable for that decision? Who's going to have to answer at the ballot box? You or members of Congress?
I am.
And that's the accountability point, right? If the feds say that you have to vote and approve a certain legislation, then the people who actually vote at the state level are then accountable for it.
The sheriffs.
The sheriff. Even if they weren't involved in entering the compact some years earlier, right? Don't assume this all happens at the same time. At a certain point in time, you might have a state that says, yeah, this is a great idea. And then all those bums get thrown out of office. And other people come and say, you know, I'm not voting for this. This is too bad. I'm going to sue to challenge it, right? So the notion of the compact assumes that the state is forever bound. But you'll see this in the executive power. What if one president surrenders certain authority and says, I don't want to do this? Is a successor bound by it? No. One president can't bind a successor. One state government can't bind a future state government. If what's at issue is individual liberty, then it's the people that are at risk, and you never can surrender that freedom if they didn't consent to it. You're still not persuaded?
No, you're not going to. No,
That's okay.
Because
I don't need to.
Only because the logic in her argument sort of changes.
It's not a tight argument. I'll give you that.
So it's not persuasive.
I'll give you that. I agree.
And it also, one could argue, and I think it may have come from somewhere. I don't know if it came from here or in my mind, but one could argue that the fact that the federal government was basically putting it back in the hands of the legislatures. It was not.
Was it putting or forcing it back?
Well, it wasn't forcing. That is part of how they tried to solve the problem when the state came to them. So instead of saying, okay, you have to do this, they would have to make a law per state in order for it to actually happen.
Yeah.
So if two individual states had made that arrangement, and New York was one of those states, and they reached, I mean, just suspending the fact that they can't have compacts and agreements between the states.
They can if Congress approves.
If New York and let's say, where's Yucca? Is that
Nevada?
Nevada. So they have a compact, and so New York's gonna send all their stuff there, and they agree to do this, and then New York backs out like that, and it went to the Supreme Court because it was a dispute between the two states. Then they would have to abide by whatever the Supreme Court said, right? It's just
Well, but there's a compact that the states voluntarily entered into, right? They vote on the compact. Congress, even though they proposed this bill, they didn't actually vote on it.
The states didn't vote on it?
States can't vote on federal law. They can suggest it.
They just had like a conference?
Yeah, they basically made a recommendation. Non-binding. Kanisha, was your hand up a minute ago?
Yeah, I had one question. What she's saying makes sense. So you were saying that you were putting accountability on what now? Because I got lost when.
Well, if Clay, or local legislature, is voting for it, he's then accountable for this law that forces radioactive waste to be deposited in the state or otherwise. It's a state legislature who then becomes accountable. The federal law distorts that accountability. That's what O'Connor says.
Right. I'm gonna let that sit over there.
Okay.
So my actual question was, when we were doing a poll, and you talked about if Congress had the ability to force the people, whichever. So when they talk about the Constitution confers upon Congress the power to regulate individuals. So how is that not? Because regulating the utility.
Well, this is actually a regulation on the state legislature specifically. It doesn't tell individuals in the state you must put radioactive waste in your backyard. It says state legislatures must enact laws that govern the usage of that waste.
I'm not specifically talking about with the uses. That statement in particular.
Which statement in particular?
The statement about the Constitution confers upon Congress the power. The framers explicitly chose a Constitution that confers upon Congress the power to regulate individuals. So does that not mean Congress has the power to regulate?
Well, they can regulate individuals, but they can't make them take action. See the difference, right? If you're in the stream of commerce, this was Charles' question a couple minutes ago. Once you're engaging in commerce, for example, Congress can regulate the heck out of you, but they can't make you do stuff.
So what's missing from here is that Congress can regulate once you put yourself in a position such that they. So you don't. It's like the Obamacare thing.
Yeah.
They can't make you do something to get into the stream of commerce so they can re-regulate.
Yeah. Look how I framed the question. I framed it somewhat carefully, right? Require you to take an action.
Okay.
They can't require you to take an action. Janice, you and the question, I won't leave you hanging. Anything else, or if we move on?
Oh no, you and I could be.
We'll sit here all night. I don't mind. I get paid to talk about the Constitution. I have the best job in the world, without question. I get paid to do this. I sometimes believe they're paying me to do this. I do this for free. I would. I taught for free for years before I even got paid for it. All right. Where am I? Okay, so the O'Connor opinion's premise in the fact that it's not a proper exercise of federal power to commandeer the states to enact legislation, because doing so distorts the political process, it shifts accountability from the feds to the states, and it intrudes ultimately upon individual liberty that federalism attempts to secure, with a fairly weakly reasoned opinion, with credit to my good friend Janice. I think you're right. I don't think O'Connor did a very good job explaining herself in this case. I don't. Scalia did a slightly better job, and Roberts a little bit better than that, but New York is very fuzzy, right? It doesn't hit it very hard. Okay. I think that's all I want to talk about. Any other questions on New York versus the United States? That's all I want to say. And again, Justice Stevens rejects emphatically that this commandeering doctrine exists.
He says under the Articles of Confederation, the federal government can issue commands to the states, and there's nothing that suggests that the power is ever withdrawn. He says the 10th Amendment imposes no limitations on federal commandeering power, and that this case is just all wrong. All wrong. He's very adamant about this issue. All right, any other questions on, oh yeah, Chris.
So it's not proper because of the state's sovereignty and that separation of those powers?
Yeah, she said, I mean, again, it's circular. This was Mai's point a couple minutes ago. But it's circular. It's not a proper exercise because it intrudes onto state sovereignty. And it intrudes on state sovereignty, so therefore it's not proper, right? It's a very fuzzy standard. It doesn't have any teeth into it, which is why, by my count, New York, Princeton, and FIB are the only cases that actually find a violation of this doctrine. Yeah. What else? All right, let's go on. The next case, Prince versus United States. A funny story about the name of the case, Prince, right? This case actually involved several different sheriffs. There was Sheriff Prince, who's over here with the cowboy hat. He was from Ravalli County, Montana, and Sheriff Mack, who was from Graham County, Arizona. This is a true story. So years ago, I put on my blog pictures of Sheriff Prince and Sheriff Mack. And I get this email out of the blue from Sheriff Mack. He says, you need to call the case Mack versus United States, not Prince. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? I mean, I was like, who is this guy? He says, you have to list them in alphabetical order, right? M, Mack comes before P, Prince. I'm like, who is this guy? So then I look it up. Does anyone know why cases are named? By the way, this sketch is one of the rare photos of Justice Scalia with a beard. There are like 2 photographs of this in existence. I don't know any. It was a brief thing in '96. I don't know, the '90s, whatever. But Nino had a full beard. It was not a good look. It wasn't a good look for him. Anyway, but Sheriff Mack. But why is a case called Prince versus Mack? You know?
Well, because it was filed first?
Yeah. The first case filed is the lower docket number. And whichever case is the lower docket number. That's why the Obamacare decision was called NFIB versus Sebelius. It wasn't Florida versus HHS, right? Because the NFIB case was first to file. It's a silly reason. So it's Prince and not Mack. Anyway, so this is Sheriff Prince. When I think of a sheriff, this is generally what I think of. He looks the part. The guy, I mean, just that chest, the barrel chest, right? I mean, he looks like he'd stop a bullet with that thing. The guy's huge. He actually sent me these pictures years ago. I think he's still around. But he was the sheriff and the coroner in Ravalli County, Montana. I mean, yeah, so I mean, he's a sheriff and the coroner. He handles everything from cradle to grave, I suppose. Oh, God. Oh, bad, Josh. Bad. But yeah, the guy was ripped. Okay, so who am I up to? Mia, are you next? No, are you? No. Who? No. I went last. Okay, Chance, you want to go again?
You skip Mia, though.
Yes.
Mia. Mia, what are the facts, please?
So this is about the...
Yeah, I skipped you because I didn't know well, and then okay, so I'll come back to you.
This is about the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act.
Okay, tell me about this Brady Act.
The provisions require the Attorney General to establish a national system for instant background checks. It's an electronic system for handgun purchases. In the interim, while the electronic system was being developed, because it didn't exist yet, the CLEO, or Chief Law Enforcement Officer, of each local jurisdiction in every state was required to conduct the checks and perform related tasks to that requirement. And so Prince and other people who fell under the CLEO qualification filed suit saying that the action was compelling them as state officers to execute a federal law, and that was unconstitutional.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mia. I apologize if I skipped you. I didn't intend to do that. 1 year, I don't know why, but I always skip this one row right here. I always skipped, and then like
some complaints like, they're your favorites, and it was totally inadvertent. So if I ever skip a row or an area, make sure you tell me. It's not. Was it stitches get snitches? No, snitches get stitches. Did I? I'm sorry. Well, you tell me. I don't. It's not deliberate. It's completely inadvertent. So here's the situation, right? Congress says we want to implement a instant background check system, right? So if you go to a firearm store and you go buy a handgun, you can perform a check. And anyone who's bought a gun knows this is pretty quick. It takes 10 to 15 minutes. It's very fast, right? But this system took some time to develop. So Congress has an idea. While we're developing the system, let's have something in the meantime to perform background checks, right? Now, Tanisha, could Congress have dispatched an 18... Yeah, you're next. Sorry. Tanisha, could Congress have hired a federal firearm agent, ATF, in every single county in the United States to sit there and perform background checks in every county in the United States? They could have, right? They didn't do that. I'm sorry? Right. I don't think that would have been appreciated, right? So Congress could have sent federal agents to every single jurisdiction in the United States, right? They could have done that. But instead, what did they do, Tanisha? What did Congress do instead of sending federal agents to every jurisdiction?
They attempted to force commandeer these CLEOs from in each of the jurisdictions to do it for them.
Ah. So they wanted Sheriff Prince, right, the chief law enforcement officer in the corner, right?
And background checker.
And now but was he a background checker? No. Was he a background checker?
Well, according to them, he was, but he was like, no.
Do you think he wanted to hold up gun purchases in his community?
Gun purchases, I would think no.
The answer is no. He was actually a board member of the NRA, for all things considered, right?
Well, then definitely
no. Here, I'll show you another picture. Yeah, and the guy's an NRA member, right? Board member. So there was a 0% chance that Sheriff Prince was going to do this, right? There was a 0% chance the sheriff was actually going to run background checks on these people. And moreover, he wasn't going to hold up gun purchases, because the way it works under this regime is if something flags, they can wait a couple days till the purchase clears, right? Now, I'm sure there were some sheriffs that were all too eager to facilitate this, and other sheriffs said, screw you. Sheriff Prince and Sheriff Mack said, screw you. Okay? So they challenged the constitutionality of the Brady Handgun Act as a violation of the Constitution. Now, Delbert, does New York for the United States provide the rule in this decision, right? Does New York get you what you need to get in order to rule against the Brady Act?
No.
Why not? Why is this case different than New York versus the United States?
Let's see. So New York versus the U.S. was just for the state.
The state what? What part of the state? You be precise. New York was about commandeering who? What branch of the state government? Not the state executive branch. Who was Clay?
Oh, I'm sorry, the legislative branch.
Very good. New York was about commandeering the state legislative branch, right? New York said that Congress can't force the states to enact legislation concerning the regulation of radioactive waste. Now, Delbert, was this case requiring the states to enact any legislation?
No.
What was actually at issue here?
The background checks.
And specifically, who was going to perform it?
The sheriff of the police.
Okay. It was the state executive branch officials, right? New York differed from Prince because it involves state executive branch officials. Everyone with me? Okay, so the cases were different. Now, why does this matter, right? This case, I think, presents a stark distinction between Justice Stevens and Justice Scalia.
they went at each other in this case, probably more than most cases. They really agreed on basically nothing. Right? They disagreed on virtually everything. Not even like one little bit did they agree on. Okay. Justice Scalia has a fairly lengthy analysis of why this law is unconstitutional. Right? So, Drew, thank you, sir. Drew, so walk me through Justice Scalia's analysis, please, of why he thinks the commandeering or the background check provision is unconstitutional.
So he started with, I think he goes through the Supremacy Clause and he speaks on the Madisonian Compromise.
Okay.
In regards to that, when he went through the analysis of the Supremacy Clause and the Madisonian Compromise, that Article 1 established only a Supreme Court and made the creation of lower federal courts optional by Congress, even though it was obvious that the Supreme Court alone could not hear all federal cases. That's what I'm looking for.
Drew, let me ask this question, right? Does Justice Scalia find any evidence that Congress has ever enacted some law like this in the past?
There was some evidence way back.
Wait, well, okay, let's talk about that evidence. It's actually important. Right? What evidence is at issue in this case, right? And again, I think Scalia and Stevens don't even agree on what the evidence actually says, right?
So there was some evidence of the federal government commandeering officers during, right when the Constitution went into effect. Even with the federal, they brought the argument.
What kind of officers were being commandeered, Drew? Finish it up. What branch of government were these state officials?
These were executive branch.
Judges. State judges, right? Give me a little bit more. What was the issue with these state judges? Scalia makes a very big fuss about this.
Okay, so he says the use of state judges and their clerks to perform executive function was in historical context hardly unusual. That's where we're at.
Yeah. So, Drew, I thought this is where you were headed, but you didn't quite finish the loop. The Constitution creates one court, right? The Supreme Court. Stay with me. Congress can create the lower courts as they wish. They don't have to, but they can. In the early years of the Republic, before the federal courts were fully staffed, Congress relied on the state courts for a lot of stuff. For example, they would issue applications for citizenship, right? They would register aliens who wanted to be naturalized. They would resolve controversies about vessels, right? The state courts did lots of things because the federal courts simply weren't staffed for it. So, someone understand? So, Jason, back up top. Does Justice Scalia find anything problematic about Congress issuing these sorts of directives to state courts?
As far as the state judges, is that what you're asking?
So I'm asking you, yeah.
State executives.
Does Justice Scalia find anything problematic that Congress gave directives to these state judges?
He mentions, I don't know if this is the answer you're looking for, but that states the execution of the laws is the responsibility of the president, and that
No, but specifically state judges.
state judges, I don't know.
Ross? Is Justice Scalia troubled by the fact that the early Congress gave directives to the state judges? Does that bother him?
Well, he says something at the bottom that they've had a lack of statutes, like there's been
There's a textual argument he makes here. You know what I'm looking for? Monique, yeah.
No, it's in the Constitution that says state judges
Yes, ma'am. Exactly right. So Scalia says, look, it's not problematic at all that the early Congress gave directives to the state judges. It's right there. It says the state judges are bound thereby. Right? Judges often apply foreign law. Think of diversity jurisdiction, right? A federal judge will have to apply state law. Also, you can go to a state court and bring a federal claim, right? The state courts understood that they would have jurisdiction over federal issues. To this day, if I have a federal claim, I can go to a Texas state court and bring suit against it. There's nothing wrong with that. State courts have jurisdiction to handle federal issues. So it's not surprising that judges, in their unique role, are applying foreign law. But can a state legislature enact a federal law? No. It can't. State executive branch officials are in a different position, right? They're in a different position than state judges. And Scalia makes a very big fuss about this. Now, to this, Justice Stevens replies, no. What about draft? There's a very big argument here just on the facts. Often in a case they disagree on the law, but in this case they don't even agree on the facts, which makes it a lot harder to reconcile. Right? So Stevens says, Bob, the federal government said we need men for the draft. And to this, Scalia replies, no. These weren't requests. They were, please, we'd like people, right? They weren't demands. Like, if you could be so nice, people do this. It's not a demand. It's a please. You don't have to. Yeah, it'd be nice, right? Send some guys to work.
Required to join the selection service.
But that's against individuals, right? And I'm going to get to that actually in about 3 questions down the road, right? But the issue here is, can the federal government ask the governor to muster up people and send them to the draft? So there's a huge factual dispute here, right? Is, in fact, the commandeering here unprecedented? Scalia says it is, and Stevens says it's not. But Jessica, I have a question that's a little more basic, right? Who cares if something's unprecedented, right? Who cares if Congress never does it before? Why should something unprecedented matter for purposes of constitutional law, right? I wrote a book about it, right? But why should something unprecedented matter? So let's do this, all right? If the federal government went 200 years without doing something, and they suddenly decided we need to do this, what should I tell court? Remember what you said. If Congress made it 2 years without doing X, then so that's a good sign that Congress shouldn't or can't, more like can't do X. But then we have McCulloch, right? A constitution intended to endure for the ages. Right? So you have these competing worldviews where McCulloch says we need to have a flexible government to handle unforeseen issues that may arise. So Justice Stevens raises a point. What if there was some sort of, contagious influenza, right, a disease outbreak? Could the CDC not force state officials to help coordinate vaccinations and disaster response? Under the Scalia, the answer is no. Now, Jeremy mentioned the draft, which I did want to get to. Jeremy, you want to talk about the draft for a minute? You asked about it, so you're calling you. So what is the basis for the draft? What gives Congress power to draw people into military service where they can injure and kill?
Congress, first of all, has the ability to make war. So they are over making war. So
okay, they can declare war.
I'm sorry.
They can declare war. Okay.
Declare war. And because so in order they don't currently use drafts, but up into Vietnam, there were basically not enough people to fight the war, so we would do a selection.
So you're making a necessary and proper argument, right? In order to fight effective war, you need to draw. Now, is that a proper exercise of federal power to drag people into combat?
Yes.
Why? Why is it proper?
It is proper because in order to make the whole purpose of the federal government is to maintain the security and the safety of the citizens.
Is there a history of drafts in this country?
Yes, sir.
going back to at least the Civil War, right?
Most notably World War II and Vietnam, which would probably be the most.
So a draft isn't quite so unprecedented as was this commandeering issue. Now, there were constitutional challenges to the draft in World War I. People asked for claims under the 13th Amendment, which eradicated slavery. And they argued that being compelled to serve in the military was a form of compulsory service, was actually unconstitutional. The court turned that away. But, you know, it's not it wasn't the best opinion, right? You can read it. I can't remember the name of it. It was a 13th Amendment draft case, if Google could find it. It wasn't the best opinion. But Jeremy's question is this, right? Why can Congress draft an individual to go to war, but they can't draft a sheriff during a background check? And Justice Stevens is very, very upset about this one in particular. He was, at the time, I think, Justice Stevens actually was a code breaker. In World War II, he served in the Army, and he actually was helping to break codes. He was a very smart guy. So he actually served, not in the front lines, but he was in the midst. But the court really says it's different. So they draw this distinction between the state judge and the federal government. Scalia makes a very big deal of the fact that this is unprecedented, it's never been done before, and that's indication that Congress can't do it. And then he goes on to federalism. He explains why having this dual sovereignty is important. Again, it's about protecting individual liberty. And he says that preventing the accumulation of too much power in any one branch reduces the risk of tyranny. And Justice Kavanaugh quoted this one verbatim this morning in the hearing. I said Justice Kavanaugh. Can't get it myself. Judge Kavanaugh. Okay. Anyway.
But you have to sort of respect Justice Stevens' response to that, in that the federal government, on the side of that, the federal government has control and have a further reaching to the states, and that also could create tyranny.
So let me actually give Stevens a little bit more credit, right? Again, I think in this case they go punch for punch, right? They go back and forth pretty hard. And the video I tried to simulate this with this left and right, red and blue scenario. We often, I'll do this later. We often describe liberty or justice. What's the meaning of liberty? Again, this is Janice's point, but Connor's decision. No. Stevens and Scalia don't even agree what liberty means. I think they have a very different definition of what that word. This is what Janice's question was getting at, right? They don't even agree what liberty is.
Very different.
Two. Yeah. So you know, Jesse. What's Well, come on. We've been talking entire for an hour about liberty. You know, we keep using this word.
Authority or government to do what you'd like to do.
So you define liberty as an absence of government, a lack of control.
Maybe.
I mean, you work for the police department, right?
Yes.
Do you think you provide people with... Does the police secure liberty? Well, in theory, right? But this is actually a fair point. Let me give you an analogy, right? There's an old parable, an old story about a wolf and a sheep, right? And I'm a shepherd, right? And I prevent the wolf from eating the sheep, right? I'm preventing the wolf from eating the sheep, right? From the wolf's perspective, I'm a tyrant. I'm an oppressor. He's hungry and he wants some lamb chops, right? And who am I to oppress him and stop him from getting what he wants? Okay? But now, I'm the sheep. The shepherd is my savior. You think about it, right? I am the Lord, right? The shepherd, that's where it comes from. Yeah. The shepherd is the savior. He is protecting him. He is securing to him the liberty of being alive. Right? But for the shepherd, his life's over. So you have these two conceptions of liberty that I think Janice hit on a minute ago. You have the Scalia one, which I think is close to what Jason was saying, that liberty is the absence of restraint, that you're free to do as you wish. And you might be eating the sheep or whatever. Whereas Justice Stevens would say that liberty is having the government protecting you from risks, in this case perhaps gun violence, which is why they enacted this law in the first place. Right? This came up in the Obamacare oral argument, where the Solicitor General actually, I don't think it was a good move, he told the Supreme Court that Obamacare protects liberty. That the Affordable Care Act protects liberty. Why? Because if people have the security to know their health care is taken care of, they can go and pursue other efforts. Right? That if you know the government is going to secure certain health care rights to you, you have more freedom to live your life as you wish. And then that was the government's argument. Then Paul Clement, who was a government lawyer for the challenger, said, no. That's not what liberty is. Liberty is telling people what they can, right? How can it be liberty to be forced to buy insurance? So the exact same case looks mirror image, right? Where the government says the mandate to buy insurance helps you secure your own security. And the other side says the mandate to buy insurance is itself a deprivation of liberty, right? And everyone just see this. These are all smart people. These are all smart lawyers who have very different philosophical baselines. I mean, they see the world differently. And I don't think one's right or wrong. You can agree or disagree. But these are very diametrically opposite points, which explains the Stevens Scalia spat, right? It's not that one's stupid and one's smart. They're both very smart judges, right? Very smart judges. But they see the world in very different lights. And if you can at least, whether you agree or not, I don't care. But if you internalize it and at least see where they're coming from, this class will make a lot more sense. This entire course will make more sense, right? This is why when you have these senators yelling at each other and Kavanaugh all this stuff, it's not that they're good or bad people. They just see the world very differently. They see the Constitution very differently. And one of the aspects of elections is people with different philosophies get appointed. That's does that make sense? What are you thinking so far? Can I say a little bit help? It's okay. I don't care if you, again, I don't care if you agree with the word I say, as long as you understand it. Steve, yes, go ahead. That's fine. Okay, you can ask her. This is your question.
Okay, so on page 272.
I don't have my book in front of me, just to tell me what it is.
His analysis of the Federalist Papers.
Okay.
At the very end of it, he says, okay, but none of these statements necessarily implies what is the critical point here, that Congress could impose these responsibilities without the consent of the states. So that was an interesting statement in making his point, but it completely contradicted the statement, the majority in New York.
How so?
Well, in that that he's making an argument that with the consent of the states, then all of these things that he talks about within the Federalist
Papers. Oh, I see what you're saying, that the states proposed the compact deal in the first place. Is that what you're talking about?
Right. So that, I mean, the end part of his argument are not an improvement on the state if the state gets consent. I mean, basically.
Do the states have any role in this federal bill? The Brady Act.
No,
the Brady Act. Yeah, the fact that it's really in your craw that the states recommended this compact regime, then they turned around and sued to challenge it.
Actually, what's in my craw is the contradiction in making a point and basically using, by any means necessary, the only that comes to mind, in order to make the point to just perpetuate the same proposition over and over and over. So it's a mindset of federalism, and it's being perpetuated by any means necessary, even if it's a contradictory analysis.
Okay, I agree. Very good point.
So that was all. I was just kind of curious.
Thank you. Yeah, let me put it this way. Holding judges to a standard of absolute consistency is going to make you very angry. Wait till we get later in the semester.
Well, it's part of my liberty.
And your tuition, you're paying damn good money to make these questions, right? But we're gonna have a lot of cases this semester where courts can
contradict themselves, a year or two apart from one to the next, and this is not unique. But I sense your frustration. I get it. I hear it. So other questions? I have more to go on. But anything else? Okay. Anyway, I think that's all I want to say about the Scalia dissent. But the Scalia dissent, again, makes the proper point. I'm sorry. The Scalia majority opinion makes the proper point very, very clear. I think what he actually does is he sort of redefines O'Connor's opinion in New York. I don't think O'Connor said what he said, but he basically says other stuff, and O'Connor joins, so I guess it's good enough. But he elaborates on what renders this law not proper is it violates state sovereignty, and that intrudes onto how the states manage on workers. Now just think about this for a minute, right? You're a sheriff, Prince. You're a busy guy. You have to handle the law. You have to perform autopsy. Right, you do lots of various things in your town. But now you have this additional responsibility. Who's going to pay for it? Right? Who's going to pay for the amount of effort it takes to run these background checks? What if you need to hire another deputy to perform these checks? Is the government going to pay for that? What if you don't have enough time? You're too busy investigating all the quadruple homicides in Raleigh County, Montana, right? And you have to then do the autopsy. You guys do the autopsy, right? All at once, right? You're a busy guy. I think Scalia's concern here is that by intruding into the state, you actually mess with their workforce, and you actually are telling them how to manage their operations, right? Now, let me give you a contemporary example that's very much a live issue, and that's the issue of sanctuary cities, right? One of the delicious ironies of this entire doctrine for me is that many of the same doctrines that supported gun rights are now being used to support sanctuary cities in California and other places. And the argument's this: Congress can't tell local law enforcement agencies to cooperate with respect to any immigrants in their custody who need to be turned over to the feds, right? The same principle that says Sheriff Prince doesn't have to perform background checks for gun checks says that local sheriffs don't perform immigration checks. They can choose to, but they're not required to. Right? The arguments are very similar. The states can say that we don't want to dedicate resources in immigration offenses because we want to focus on, say, higher crimes or murder, the things that actually are violent offenses that matter. If there are violent offenders, maybe we'll call the feds, but otherwise we won't. And we want to hold people over beyond when their time is up. So the same doctrines from Prince in New York affect the sanctuary city cases. In fact, a number of courts have actually ruled that efforts to withhold funds from the sanctuary cities actually runs afoul of some of these commandeering doctrines. Another question. Craig.
Is there slavery term? Basically, the essence of the case is that if the state law is in conflict with the federal,
what a good question.
law, then federal law trumps it, and therefore.
No, Meg. Here's the question, right? Is it
Yes,
my? I'm sorry.
Doesn't matter.
No, I want to get your names right. A state law is unconstitutional if it conflicts with the federal law, right? But what if the federal law is unconstitutional?
However, their
No,
background check is not unconstitutional because the Congress is working out a system to run it.
Let me run this by you, right? A state law that conflicts with federal law is preemption, right? But if the federal law is unconstitutional, then the state law is fine. That was how Prigg came about. Prigg wasn't a challenge to the Fugitive Slave Act. In Prigg, you had a state law, and the slave catcher said, aha, this law is unconstitutional because of the federal law. And he was right, he prevailed. So here, if California enacts a sanctuary city statute, and federal law says you can't do that, and the federal law is unconstitutional, what happens to the California law?
It still stands.
It still stands. Everyone understand what you just said, right? If a federal law is not proper, it's not a law at all. If a federal law is not proper, if a federal law is not proper, it is not law at all. It is what's called a usurpation. Was that quote from Federalist? Was it 69? No.
merely an act of usurpation which deserves to be treated.
And this is why Kavanaugh, he quoted this one verbatim from memory, so he's good. Yeah, Federalist 33, I'm sorry. Right? If a law is not proper, it is itself a usurpation and deserves to be treated as a valid law. That's why the Fed say in California you can't enforce the sanctuary law, and the federal law itself is unconstitutional, and California can do whatever it wants to do. Now, on a side, the California law I think has other problems, right? California law I think does raise some issues. For example, in California, they can actually inspect federal facilities, and they can actually intrude onto how the feds perform their work. I think they're going to have some trouble with some. I think it's a mixed bag. Some of the California laws are okay, some aren't. I think it's going to be a split difference. Okay, that's what I'd say in the majority. Any other questions on the Scalia majority? Very important decision. Again, this wasn't a Second Amendment case. It's a Thomas concurrence in your book? Yeah, it's real short. Yeah, I always forget what's in your book or not. Yeah, the Thomas concurrence was the basically saying, yeah, this violates federalism, the same old deal, right? Beats his drum, rethink everything. Well, no, but they did, because he basically flagged the Second Amendment issue, and this would come to the Supreme Court 12 years later in the Heller case. Yeah. Right, again, this was not a Second Amendment case, but it could have been. And it came to the court 12 years later. All right. Any questions on Scalia or Thomas? All right. I think I've gone over everything in the Stevens dissent. I don't think there's anything else I'm going to mention. Here's one to mention. So, yeah, Yarn. Justice Thomas plants seeds. That's what he does. He plants seeds that germinate for years, and people think about it. And 12 years later, the Second Amendment would come to the Supreme Court in 2008 in the Heller case. But this opinion was very important. Where this case, maybe one or two others, he would start and grouse at the Second Amendment. Now, Scalia and Stevens again agree on very little, but I think Justice Stevens actually quietly agree that Scalia had a point, right? With the state judges, right? It says right there, state judges are bound, right? It says state judges. In 2011, I can't remember, Justice Stevens wrote a book called, was it called 5 or 6 Amendments? I can't remember the title. He proposed several amendments to the Constitution, right? One of the amendments was to amend the Supremacy Clause. He wanted to amend the Supremacy Clause by adding, four words, right? It says, the Constitution, the law, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges and other public officials in every state shall be bound. You see what he's doing there, right? So it's not just state judges, but also state executive officials like Sheriff Prince. I think this is Stevens saying, okay, Scalia, fine, you win in the text, but you're wrong on everything else. All right. I don't have anything else to say. Yeah, not the best. Yeah. Huh? Right.
Incidental minimum powers to encourage the states. She talked about the spending power and the commerce power, and then she kind of talked about the great substantial power being like forward.
Yeah, I mean, so let me try to synthesize Mia's question, right? In her opinion in bold, she says there has to be some sort of relationship between what the money is being spent on and what actually has to be done. So, for example, Congress says, we'll give you money to make highways with, bright yellow divider lines in the middle, that's fine. But you can't say we'll give you money for highways if you change your drinking age. There's also the compulsion point, which is actually in the majority as well. They said, at a certain point, persuasion moves past the line and becomes compulsion. That reflected the idea of state sovereignty, that states can't be put into a position they're not really bargaining for, right? Here too, none of the states asked for this, unlike perhaps in New York. None of the states, maybe some states wanted it, but Montana sure as hell did not want this background check system. They did not request it. Montana did not want the background check system. So they basically left you with no choice. It's either take the money or die, right? Your money or your life. And here too, South Dakota has no choice. You either take the money or not. In Obamacare, take the Medicaid money or not. You have no choice. And so I do think there's a parallel. Right? If the states aren't given a competent choice, that runs afoul of the Constitution.
So anything, so the coercion isn't just limited to like the limits on the spending power. That's just in general, like
It's
the
a
limits
general
on the
doctrine.
proper.
Yes.
Okay.
And again, I didn't mention this, but Dole was a necessary and proper case. Right? What did they mention it? Oh, good, I forgot. But what was the basis for the Obamacare ruling and the Medicaid expansion? It wasn't just the spending clause. It was actually necessary and proper. It's like every freaking case is actually necessary and proper. Every case. They never mention it. But it's all about what's proper. Whether you go to federalism, it's all about proper. It's all about proper. Every case overlaps with it, which is why it's the most important provision of the Constitution. After the Supremacy Clause. The Supremacy Clause first. We could exist without necessary and proper. I don't think we could exist without the Supremacy Clause. I think we wouldn't go very far. We would not go very far at all. Anything else? I will see you all on Sunday, or hopefully Saturday if you're like that with Arlene, and me on Sunday. How you feeling? Happy birthday!
I'm here, sir.